Part of my theory is going to be centered around the great structure of planet Earth and how I believe that the Great Pyramid can be used as a linchpin of understanding when it comes to this structure. My theory is that the Earth has a particular structure. I hypothesize that it has a measurable set of integers that are laid out in a lattice grid network. This is to build off of a little bit of Charlie Solis's theories. He's the ones that kind of has put together some of Nikola Tesla's observations as well as a couple of his own theories. But basically, there are points on the planet that are more or less seismically stable than others. And this is known. We know that there are certain locations that'll be better or worse for earthquakes, such as fault lines, etc. I believe that these areas of greater and lower seismic stability are laid out on a specific pattern, and that pattern can be measured. I believe it's possible that the ancients had this knowledge. I believe that it's possible they knew about this when they built the Great Pyramid. I believe that it's possible that the pyramid itself's location is very particular, and that the location for the Great Pyramid is a global land marker. I believe that it's possible that architects still maintain this knowledge to a degree when it comes to massive building projects. And I'm going to demonstrate, or at least hopefully show, how this can be known and how that it's useful. The main focal point is that the theory that the Earth rings like a bell. So all motion is vibration, all vibration is motion. It's just the consequence of being an object that exists. There's nothing that's absolutely at a sit still. Everything moves, everything vibrates. The Earth has its own specific vibration frequency. We know that it's constantly moving and vibrating at this frequency. There are multiple other frequencies, but vibration has an effect on whatever substance it passes through. So whatever substance is allowing the vibration wave to propagate along is called a medium. This medium moves with the wave of the vibration. If you're familiar with how waves on water work, you'll notice that the water itself, at a single point, doesn't actually move along the water. It's the energy wave that moves along and will keep a buoy or a bird or something floating in place, but the energy is transferred along the distance. So those waves can have interesting effects when they intersect and compound. Multiple waves crashing together yields certain shapes. And multiple waves, all laid out in a rhythmic pattern, will create patterns of intersection. The Earth is primarily a liquid. If you consider a egg, the Earth is primarily like a liquid with a core and a mantle, and then there's a thin outer shell. That outer crust is hardened liquid rock. That rock is the same rock that's used as foundations for these large building projects, including the pyramid, as well as their stones. Majority of the mantle that is within the Earth's crust is granite rock, liquefied. So, just like how an energy wave can pass through water, so too can the Earth's vibrational waves pass through this liquid mantle and magma. And just as the waves can affect the shape of the water when it comes to making waves and ripples, so too do I believe do these vibrational patterns present themselves on the exterior hardened surface of the rock that is the Earth. Now, I believe that there could be a pattern on the crust of the Earth that has been laid out by these ripples and vibrations. I believe that this lattice network could have been known to the ancients because they knew a lot of other things. But just as a visual, here are a couple of demonstrations of intersecting ripples and how they can make peaks and valleys, as well as something called a Worthington jet. A Worthington jet is a feature in liquid where a plunged item will then create a negative effect of the medium that it has displaced. So as you insert something into the water, so too does the water push back and then exert something at the same point. Now, I'm not saying that there are impacts on the earth that have created these peaks and valleys. What I mean is just the natural motion of the water, or rather the liquid magma, moving back and forth has created a bunch of these peaks and valleys. And we know that there is a constant level of vibration happening along the Earth's surface and under the Earth's surface in its liquid magma through the Schumann resonance. Schumann resonance is 7.83 hertz. It's known as the heartbeat of the planet. It is constantly vibrating at this speed. Therefore, if the Earth has maintained this same vibrational frequency for hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, maybe billions of years, it may lay out a similar type of grid pattern that we see on the surface of the hardened, cooled rock. So, how can this knowledge be useful to a set of builders? Stone buildings are impervious to most elements. A large stone structure will often not have to worry about any type of weathering, including like hurricanes or lightning strikes or wildfires. Stone is pretty solid. You can build and stack stone and have it sit in the same spot the exact same way for thousands and thousands of years. The only thing that can threaten a large stone structure would be an earthquake or some kind of monumental cataclysm. Megalithic stone projects are a huge investment. If you think about the amount of manpower that had to go into the construction, design, and implementation of the Great Pyramid of Giza, it's not an easy feat. You would want that thing to last as long as your investment is put in. So, they weren't just making this as a temporary building. This building was meant to last a long, long, long time. Knowledge of seismically stable areas would be very, very valuable to anyone who is an architect that's trying to make a project of this type or size. This scale is monumental, and if we're considering talking about certain stones weighing up to 1.9 million pounds, such as the stone of the pregnant woman, or the Kingstone chamber stones in the Great Pyramid, it's monumental. So let's think about the possibility of the cataclysmic Younger Dryas events. If such events happened, wouldn't it make sense to then try to restart society in a way that would not have that happen again. You know, you have some kind of ultimate cataclysm that has destroyed all of your great stone structures and works. Let's make another one, stronger, better, more encoded, and more seismically sound and stable, so that way the stones will never be knocked over again. I believe that's what the pyramid is for. I believe that's one of the purposes of it, to maintain this knowledge as well as to demonstrate it. The Great Pyramid as a building project. The meter as a measurement is possibly older than we think it is. It's officially named and discovered in 1791. However, what it actually is a ratio of the size of the entire globe. It's 1/10,000,000th of the distance from the equator to the North Pole. So, if someone who was an ancient person had knowledge of the size of the Earth and was able to express that in an integer, then it's possible that you could use that integer to then express knowledge of different ground networks. So, we know that the Great Pyramid is encoded with a lot of mathematical information, and so is the surrounding complex. There's a litany of things that you can get into in terms of the size, shape, ratios, aspects, and different mathematical information of the actual structure and shape of the pyramid itself, as well as the different chambers that are inside. So I would say that it makes just as much sense that the location of the pyramid is just as significant. I believe that it's possible that the exact spot that the pyramid resides is a very significant location for multiple reasons. And I believe that there's something there. That's the reason that the pyramid was put in the place that it's put. But I'll get to that in another video. So, how can we find clues to this known structure or network? I believe I can demonstrate the possible existence of this mappable grid across the planet. I believe the locations of many ancient and modern building projects are very purposeful for their foundation sites. I have more than 100 plot points of interesting integers, which I believe are too much for coincidence. And I believe all of this compounding information can be used to argue for the existence of a pre-Ice Age civilization. In addition to that, I think that I hope to demonstrate the preciseness of the location of the Great Pyramid, as well as a couple of particular ancient structures in relation to the Great Pyramid. I think that the meter being a expressed exact integer of the Earth is important. I believe that was known, and I believe you can demonstrate the location of particular objects that are construction pieces in areas that may demonstrate a grid network of seismic stable areas. So first, I'm going to zoom in and show you here on Cairo. This is the Great Pyramid. We're going to use this as our center point. I tried to get as much of these as close to the center. These are all at least within like a meter. I'm pretty sure when you get as close to here, it's within less than half of a meter. So the first one that we're going to demonstrate is, and this is to show that there is a exactness to this grid, and that it was known by the people who built the Great Pyramid, and I also believe that it's possible that the Great Pyramid is older than we think that it is. So the first plot point that I'm going to show is the South Pole, this one being exactly 13.320000
meters. I'm going to call an audible for 0.2. I think that's within a reasonable deviation. So that's exactly 180 degrees south. We're going to fly to it just so that way I can show you. This took me a few tries, but this is about as center on this circle as I can get. And that is a direct line from the center of the South Pole. And we have another one there, but we'll show you that in a minute. All the way back up to the Great Pyramid. And again, 13.320000 meters exactly. That, I think, is pretty demonstrational. We know that the Great Pyramid is approximately the latitude of the speed of light, and Larry Paul has some interesting theory about how he believes the longitude is in relation to pi. I think this is also something that's interesting. 13.320000 meters exactly. Also, Charlie Solis, I'm going to credit with part of this discovery because he was the one that started checking out these plot points. I believe he was the one that first checked out the South Pole. He's got a couple of interesting ones as well. Now, I also have a few interesting plot points of some other ancient structures and places that I want to do. But I want to show a couple of interesting Earth features first. So, the first one that I'm going to demonstrate is a very, very distant one. So again, what I'm trying to demonstrate is that the cooling and hardening of the Earth's crust and surface is in relation to the vibrations that come from the Earth. And these have laid out this geosphere in a particular shape and in a particular grid that we can demonstrate, or perhaps that there are just integer variables that show where these peaks and valleys lie. And maybe it's not like an exact grid, but you can actually see like a couple of places. But let me show you. The first one is going to be Hangaroa, which, if anyone's familiar, is Easter Island. So this one is 16.166 million meters away. Now, I've picked a specific spot on the island, so let me show you. I'm not going to get through every single one on this video. I'll have an actual video where I go through every single one of my plot points. I have more than 100. This is Easter Island. So what I want to show is not just particularly the island, but this interesting little crater feature. Not just a crater feature, but kind of centered on this larger sunken mound. So if you remove the water, this could be the centerpiece, because if you see it's not so centered to the island, but if you consider everything that's underneath the water's surface, it actually kind of is more centralized. And this is where some kind of caldera is for, it looks like it was possible some kind of magma eruption at some point, so maybe this is like an exact point. I've been able to plot this down to the very, very center, almost, of this center caldera. And again, that's 16.166 million meters, exactly to the Great Pyramid. Again, I don't know if this actually proves anything. I just think that a lot of this stuff is actually really interesting. Now, I have a few more that I think are really interesting as well, uh, especially some older ruins. But let me just show you a couple islands, I think. Um, Sao Jorge, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but 5.679000 meters exactly. I'll show you where this is. And again, this is like the center of a feature that's also like a photograph point that's in a pretty centralized location. Uh, there's another one here, 5.889. This is in another caldera on an island. I have a few more, but let's show Midway Atoll. I was off by like 2 meters, but 12.892, and if you adjust it slightly, it's 000. I'll show you where Midway this is. Right in front of the NWR headquarters, right on the center of this piece of the island. Then we also have Gibraltar, which is 3.454 million meters exactly. I don't know if I should say exactly. I don't know how this proves anything or if this is just craziness. But take a look, decide for yourself. Here I've picked this spot on Gibraltar. This is a pretty high traffic area that you can see is pretty centralized on the rock. I believe that foot traffic and human activity has something to do with this. I think that they put the highest strength areas where the most people would go. And that's because if you've ever seen a rhythmic people moving, it creates its own vibrational waves that can compound, and compounding waves are most dangerous. So, you can see that this spot, which is, if you zoom out, pretty centralized to this top piece of the island or peninsula. Now, let me show you also Gobekli Tepe, 1080. So 1.080000.1, but meters. And if you notice, it's on one of these interesting tree plots that Jimmy Corsetti was so keen to point out that their roots could be damaging things that are below there. I wonder if there is something below there, because that seems kind of centralized to this forested area. Could those have been planted on purpose to hide something that's right underneath there? I don't know. 1080 is an interesting number. That has an interesting relationship with circles. And speaking of circles, I'm also going to show you the Rashat structure, 4.360000. Let me show you where on the Rashat structure this is. This is kind of pretty centralized to the center of the Rashat structure. I don't know how exact that is, but I bet you could trace it north or south and find the exact center point. And that might be 4.360 million meters. That I think is probably the most interesting one. 4.360, 360 degrees, a circle. This, I think, is fascinating. This combined with the South Pole, I think, is actually really, really interesting. Now, I'm also going to show a couple other interesting ones. The Baalbek Temple entrance, only 655,000 meters away, but let me show you where that is, because Baalbek is one of the oldest structures that we know of. I think the pyramid might be older, but Baalbek we can date to be older. So this is the actual temple. But if you see here, and if you get rid of all of like the modern structure, this would kind of be the entranceway where you'd have all the people assembled. And again, this kind of rhythmic walking or possibly chanting could be significant when it comes to seismic activity. I'm down to like the meter here, and this is kind of interesting. Again, I don't think any one of these plot points are really significant by themselves, but all compounded together, it's kind of interesting where the pyramid is. Let's show a couple also that are in Egypt. So, not to show you that it's just like other coincidental things. Amun-Ra, Karnak, 495.5, but this is also in kind of the middle of this square, in the center of this large complex. So, this could be a significant point as well. I have one at Luxor for 493. And that's 493 kilometers exactly to this center point at Luxor, the Ramesseum. The Queen's Island in Luxor is 500,000 exactly. 500,000 kilometers exactly from the Great Pyramid sits the Queen's Island in Luxor. And not just the Queen's Island, kind of the centerpiece of the Queen's Island. We also have one at the Ziggurat entrance, 1.44.5. Some of them I think are half integers, but again, this walks us right onto the entranceway, the Great Ziggurat. Here's one for Mohenjo-Daro, 3.614. The Mohenjo-Daro ruins. This gets you kind of right in the middle of the Mohenjo-Daro ruins. There's one at this Athens Theater, 1.119000. And again, not just at the theater, but kind of right at the center of this like circular part of the theater. And all of these plot points are all centered at the Great Pyramid. And again, I did try to be pretty precise when I was laying them down. The top of the pyramid's only probably a couple of meters wide. I probably have these within like a half meter of each other, maybe 1 meter. But still, I think a lot of this is pretty significant. Let me show you a couple of pyramid structures. So here is the Pyramid Mountain in Antarctica. Interesting just because I thought it was 141414. And this could be 148. So 14, 148, 148. This is approximately where it is. It's kind of hard to check it out on the Google map, but that is kind of where the pyramid is. That's not like really one of the greatest ones. The Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, 1.93000. That one is kind of pretty good. That one's almost right on the plot point here. The Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, 1.93 million meters exactly from the Great Pyramid in Cairo. That's fun. Um, Again, I'm not going to do all these, but this one's kind of interesting. The Vatican helipad, 2.135. Maybe that's because it's seismically stable to take it. But let me show you about why this is interesting for the Vatican. Because it's right in the smack dab center of this H, which is only a couple meters wide. But look how the Vatican, the city itself, is like up to here, but then they decided to cut over and take this part also instead of giving that to Rome. So they decided to keep this little chunk of land and cut it out specifically for some reason. And it just so happens that the center of this helipad is 2.135 million meters exactly from the Great Pyramid. This is Piramide Los Monos, 11.788 million meters. This one, not as super precise, but it's covered by a lot of vegetation, but it says pyramid. I mean, there's a lot of pyramids there, so let's not go crazy, I guess. Let's see. I have one at Baghdad for 1.306000. And that gives us almost the center of this circular pool area. I just thought that was interesting. But Baghdad is an ancient city, and this spot is right next to the Tigris River. So this complex also 1.297. This is kind of close by. That's kind of right here at this structure. I'm not sure if that's significant or not. Now, I have also one at America, Rock Lake Pyramid, 0.5. This is just interesting just because it says Rock Lake Pyramid, and if you put the plot point like on it, it's kind of that half one, but I don't know, not super convincing. There's the Alaska Black Pyramid, which is 9.655. Oh, hang on, let's fly to that one. Anyway, maybe we'll come back to that one. Let me also show you these structures. These are two structures that are presumed to possibly be pyramids. 7.166000. Again, maybe not so convincing because it's not super centralized. But then the other one, 7.165.5. And again, these may be pyramids. I also have one for the Colosseum entrance at 2.131, otherwise known as the vomitorium, where people would be going in and out. I have a few at the Teotihuacan complex, but these might not be super convincing. Maybe this one at this centerpiece. That's this one at 12.343.5 at this center circular piece. Chichen Itza at 11.472000. So again, I don't know how convincing like any of this is, but check for yourself. Maybe there is something. I think there's something to this because of the well, because I know that the well is significant for its water source. I'm not sure. There's a lot more. Again, I don't have every single one on here, but I'm just going through a bunch of really significant ones. I hope to demonstrate a few modern architecture accomplishments that I think are significant when it comes to their relationship in terms of their distance to the Great Pyramid. So we have a few from, and I tried to get a few of these as centralized here as possible. I know these are a little bit off, but we're going to call it a margin of error because we're talking about like by the kilometer exactly. So down to like the 1,000 meter, 000 meters exactly for a few of these. But let me show you these. A lot of these are going to be more modern and take what you will. I don't know if this actually does prove anything, but it's interesting, I think. Now, the first one that we're going to go with is probably the most fun one. This is the Bass Pro Shop Memphis Pyramid. If we change this 2 meters, the Bass Pro Shop Memphis Pyramid is 10,000,532 meters exactly. 000 meters. So let's show you in relationship where the Great Pyramid is to the Bass Pro Shop Pyramid. I know it's kind of hard to see, but like this is like it doesn't end like there. It actually does go like inside almost to like the exact center. 10.532. Let me see if I can click on it. Uh, it's because of like these 3D things they put on the map, but it's somewhere like actually like not exactly the center, but kind of like right here. But I think that's kind of interesting. The Empire State Building is 9.035000 meters away from the center of the Great Pyramid. And again, this 3D thing kind of doesn't really show exactly where I've put the plot point, but you can kind of see that it does go into the structure 9.035. I think the Empire State Building might be a significant point. Plus, it's also pretty centralized in Manhattan Island. There's also Philadelphia City Hall, 9.16700 meters. Let me show you where this goes to on Philadelphia. Once again, this is in the complex here. It kind of goes through, but it kind of does stop right at this spot in the center. If I can click this. Either way, there's also this spot on the Capitol Mall, 9.365. Show you where this is. There's a couple of spots, I think, in Washington, D.C. So this is the Capitol Mall spot. This is like the center of this walkway right here is 9.365. Then we also have this spot in Lafayette Square. Lafayette was the designer of the Capitol, and right in front of his monument, if you stand right in front of his monument, you will be at 9.366000 million meters exactly from the Great Pyramid if you stand and face Lafayette. There's also, this one is really fun, the Fenway Park Pitcher's Mound. Fenway Park, oldest America's ballpark, 8.3 or 8.737. And let me show you exactly where this one is. It's right on the pitcher's mound, right in Fenway Park. So that's pretty neat. There's also, what's interesting is a replica of the Parthenon, 10.2385, so that's a half integer, but it's an exact replica of the Parthenon. And I dropped this one basically like right in the center. Again, the 3D on the map doesn't really show you. But you can measure these yourself. There's the Virginia State House, which is 9.48 million meters exactly. So this one drops you right in the middle of the Virginia State House. There's the Vegas sign, which is 11.892. And this is right in the middle of this little grassy spot where the Vegas sign is. I don't know. I don't know what that means. There's also Disney, Epcot, 10.386. I'll go to there. And this is right in front of the Christmas tree on the center of this island, which is the center of this complex. Then there's also the Magic Kingdom, which is 10.386. And this is the flagpole. The exact darn center of that flagpole, right in front of the other Christmas tree, is 10.386. And that's pretty crazy. There's also a couple of other ones that are interesting, like Carhenge in Nebraska is 10.737. Which is interesting. Like this spot in what they call Carhenge, or right near it. Then there's also a couple of interesting ones I think too is like Ohio Stadium, 9.711. So I'll show you that on the Ohio Stadium, right on the 35-yard line, 34. It's pretty interesting, I think. Beaver Stadium, 9.304. So again, not in the exact center, but I don't know, maybe you have to also incorporate like the surrounding area. I think it's interesting. There's also CERN, 2.824. And this is a building at CERN. Science Gateway, right by the circular structure again. There's the Shard in London, 3.511. I think that's kind of interesting. We'll zoom in on the Shard. Again, the line is taken up by this 3D thing, but if you see, it goes right to where the Shard is. Right there, kind of right on the middle. There's the Hollywood sign, 12.22 million meters exactly from the center of the Great Pyramid. This is what we're talking about, the center of the Great Pyramid. I think this is kind of fascinating. If we go to the middle of the Hollywood sign, I don't know what that's about. I think that might be significant. I'm going to say the center of Moscow, 2.909. But let me show you here. because this is Moscow. This is a pretty big urban complex, and this is kind of like right in the center. And this kind of goes right to the middle of a circular structure, deviating like a meter or so for standard deviation. I don't know, margin of error. It's kind of right in the middle. There's the St. Petersburg Stadium, 3.334. Oh, where did that go? I don't know where that went. There's this flag in Istanbul, which is 1.24 million meters exactly from the Great Pyramid. And look, it's a gigantic flag, and this flagpole is right there. So, I don't know if this proves anything, but it's really interesting. Here's another one, 2.572. Pretty significant structure. This gigantic cathedral and on. And the plot point is kind of almost like right in the center here too. So draw your own conclusions. I think it's pretty significant. I think that this does demonstrate something. I don't know exactly what. I don't know if it could actually measure anything, but I've also got one for like the Taipei 101 building. I've got the NASA Assembly building. I've got the Bucharest Parliament building, 1.664. And this kind of goes right to the Bucharest Parliament building, the center of it, or almost the center. Maybe it is just coincidental. 9.364 for Columbus Circle in DC. This goes right here. Now, one that I think is actually really significant is the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. 9.37 million meters exactly from the Great Pyramid. And this goes right here, right where you'd stand, in between the monument and the tomb itself. I don't know. You tell me.